Good morning and welcome to Bravo 22 live programme on YouTube. This has been made possible by the Royal British Legion and the Drive Project. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Sarah and I've been a member of Bravo 22 since July 2016 when I was involved in the Art of Recovery in Brighton. Bravo 22 has loads of creative stuff to offer you, including top artists sharing their insights across a vast range of skill areas, chatting to you live straight into your living rooms. Please remember to tell all your military friends and family about Bravo 22's live and ask them to follow the YouTube channel and to like and share it on Facebook. And don't forget to ask as many questions on the live chat during this session. We will try to answer as many as we can, but you are relying on me and I can only concentrate on one thing at any time. So it may be very, very interesting. There is loads and loads to come over the next few weeks, and I will fill you in on all the details of that at the end of this session. So now I'm going to hand over to the awesome Al, who will be leading this session on our masterpiece, The Tiger by William Blake. Over to you, Al.
Thank you, Sarah. How lovely. Lovely to have you with us, all of you that are watching, and lovely to have Sarah introducing our session. In fact, this masterpiece session series has been chosen by you, and this particular work, or at least the artist, was chosen by Sarah. So first of all, tell us why, Sarah, tell us why you chose William Blake as your masterpiece.
Well, it's one of the few memories of my GCSEs. He's a very interesting guy. He wasn't just a painter. He was an engraver, and he also was a poet. Some people won't recognise at all, but he wrote words for songs too.
Right, yeah, I think you may not know the name actually, William Blake, because he is quite a sort of he's an interesting artist, but not everyone thinks they've heard of him. But you will have heard of him because of this song. So we're just going to have a blast of a tune that you'll know. Okay. We won't have a blast of the tune that you'll know. Well, I'm sorry about that, because Sarah and I were going to conduct. We were very excited about conducting. So the clip you might have heard, or you would have heard if it had played, was a clip from Jerusalem, which has become known as the sort of English anthem. So Blake wrote the words to Jerusalem, and that's become enormously popular with people who, Blake may well not have approved of, like the women's organisations, and I think the Conservatives play it. Anyway, William Blake. So, Sarah, you really liked the tiger particularly, didn't you?
Yes.
And the tiger is an interesting image. Let's have a look at image one, the tiger, and it's a very strange image actually in a way, because it's not just a painting, or it's not a painting at all, really. It's a poem, and there's an image of the tiger at the bottom. I don't know if William Blake had ever seen a tiger. I'm not entirely sure he had, or maybe one in the zoo. It's quite a sort of humble-looking tiger, quite sort of a terrorised tiger. But the poem is extraordinary. I'll come back to the poem in a moment. I'll tell you a little bit about Blake himself. So he lived in London. He lived all his life in London. He was a painter, an engraver, a poet, and he was pretty much unrecognised during his lifetime. He was a very significant figure as it's, you know, in retrospect, in the Romantic age. So that sort of period of, he lived from the mid 1700s into the early 1800s. So that the Romantic age. He had visions. He was actually, he had his first vision when he was about 10, and his father was very annoyed and punished him for saying he had visions. But his whole life, he said he was regarded now as visionary because he had visions. He was considered to be mad when he was alive, actually. He said his work was prophetic, and it was very much about envisaging ideas beyond the real, the kind of the narrative of ordinary people's lives. It was much more about spiritual ideas. Jonathan Jones, who's quite a famous critic, has said he was far and away the greatest artist Britain has ever produced, and that's quite something for someone who was never really celebrated in his lifetime. Blake was very interested in imagination, and he said the imagination was human existence itself. So he was very excited by the imagination. He was a Christian, but he was very, very opposed to any organised religions, which got him into a lot of trouble. And he was said to be a glorious luminary. So there's this idea, even during his life, that he was a visionary, he was prophetic, he was excited about the spiritual, but not somebody that fitted neatly into the contemporary kind of mould. Let's go back to the tiger, that our first image of the tiger. So this is from a book called The Songs of Innocence and Experience. And Blake said he made this book. It was illustrated poems. So every page had a poem and an illustration on it. And he said he was interested in the two contrary states of the human soul, the childlike and pure versus the angry and disillusioned. Now I'm going to read you the poem because it's intriguing, and in that, if we're looking at image one again, it is actually quite hard to read. Now the reason for that is because of Blake's technique. Because now, Sarah, you said you remembered this from your studies many thousands of years ago.
Yes.
Can you tell us what the technique was? Do you remember?
He managed to reverse it in some way.
He did, yeah. Normally, what you do with an engraving, so all these images are engravings, so they're designed for reproduction. If you make a painting, you can only have one, or you can make a copy, you can have two. You can make a few copies, you can have half a dozen, but it's really hard work to make a copy, and every one is a bit different. If you make an engraving or a print, you can have loads and loads of copies. And engravings were made by incising into soft metal. So you use a sort of a tool called an échoppe, which was is like a very sharp oval pointed tool, and that would carve into the metal. And what you normally do is you carve into the metal, and then you put that in acid, and the marks you've made are bitten deeper. But what he did was actually wrote all this stuff the wrong way round, so the poem was written back to front, and then he wrote it using stop out ink, which is to stops the acid biting into the plate. So he wrote it all back to front in stop out ink, and then he left it in nitric acid for hours and hours. Some of the plates took 7 hours to turn themselves into the right consistency. And then, so what happened was the areas around the writing were bitten away, and the writing stood up. So the writing was in relief, and the drawings were in relief. So it was a very long-winded process and completely original. He invented it all himself. Then he mixed the ink with carpenter's glue, which was thickened it, and so the printing is very thick. And then finally he would print them, and then finally he added detail in watercolour. So the colour on it is watercolour. So quite a very peculiar technique, actually. Quite an interesting invention that he came up with. So have we got any questions?
Yeah,
Seth?
we've got a few actually, but first we've got to shout out to Ian and Graham who are watching. But question-wise, Kate has said, and she's asked, why did people's opinion of Blake change after his death?
Oh, very good question. Well, I think we're probably a bit more liberal now. I think religion was very, very clear cut. You know, there were ways, belief systems, and you took them on wholesale. And anyone who was not kind of, you know, so someone like Blake who criticised the Church of England, which was actually absolutely sacrosanct, he would already be outcast for his views. It wasn't appropriate to have visions. Only very significant people, saints and people like that, and you know, people that were important in the church had visions. Ordinary people weren't expected to have visions, so that sort of cut him out of society. And he was quite strange. I think, you know, I think people regarded him as being a real oddity. Probably even now he would be regarded as a bit of a weirdo, but I don't know. But certainly at the time, he didn't fit the mould. That's the thing, I suppose. But then, you know, times have changed and things have improved, and I think people are a bit more able to take on sort of shifts in personality. We're a bit more adaptable now, perhaps.
And Ian says, everybody says the first line of the poem is menacing. To set the scene then, so does Al think it's supposed to be menacing?
What, for Tiger?
Yeah.
Look, what I'm going to do is read you the poem and you can decide for yourselves. I think it is meant to be menacing. I think what he's doing is comparing two sets of ideas of God, probably, and it's possible that this is talking to God, saying, you know, why did you do this as well as this? So the opposing poem is the Lamb, which I'll read you a bit of. But this is the Tiger. So and I know Ian has made a lovely sort of move through the image so we can see it as I read it. So this is the poem. Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye could frame thy fearful symmetry? In what distant deeps or skies burnt the fire of thine eyes? On what wings dare he aspire? What the hand dare seize the fire? And what shoulder and what art could twist the sinews of thy heart? And when thy heart began to beat, what dread hand and what dread feet? What the hammer, what the chain? In what furnace was thy brain? What the anvil, what dread grass dare its deadly terrors clasp? When the stars threw down their spears and watered heaven with their tears, did he smile his work to see? Did he who made the Lamb make thee? Tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forests of the night, what immortal hand or eye dare frame thy fearful symmetry? Absolutely extraordinary poem. And what he's doing, I think, is saying, how could God make the tiger, this sort of, and the tiger is, I think, representing something much bigger, aggression, perhaps. There's several ideas of what the poem was, millions of ideas of what the poem means, but is he talking about the anger of God? Is the tiger representing the anger of God? Is it representing the aggressive spirit of mankind? Is it representing man's imagination? And then he makes a second image, which is also in Songs of Innocence and Experience. This is probably the most well-known, actually, of the poems, the Lamb. So if we look at image 2, and I won't read you the whole poem. It's not so exciting as the tiger. And the Lamb, I think, is about a kindly God, so the opposite kind of God, who calls himself a lamb and is meek and mild. The Lamb referenced a lot in the Bible, and perhaps refers to divine love. So, little lamb who made thee, dost thou know who made thee? Gave thee life and bid thee feed by the stream and all the mead. Gave thee clothing of delight. Softest clothing, woolly bright. Gave thee such a tender voice, making all the vales rejoice. So that's a much softer poem, a complete contrast. I think he's in these two poems in Songs of Innocence and Experience. He's coming up with two completely different views of what God is like, or what we as humans are like. Okay, any more questions?
Yeah, we've got some from Sally, actually. So there's 3 questions here. So,
Sally, calm down.
She says, were all his paintings engravings?
Yes.
She also says, does Blake see Tiger as God? And a final one is, what do you think about him adding words to a painting?
Well, they're all engravings. They're all engravings with painting on them. So they're engravings with, and watercolor. I think he's with the tiger. I think he's posing ideas actually about what God is. I think he's saying, how can he be this if he's this? How can he be the divine savior, meek and mild, divine, representing divine love like the lamb, and also be aggressive like the tiger? I think he's posing questions for us, really. I think I might have missed out one of the questions. What was the last one?
I can't remember. No, I think you covered them all.
Have I? Oh, good.
I'm sorry if I haven't, Sally, but
we can come back if Sally's so good putting lots of questions in. Okay, let's move on to another image. So this one, image 3, is called it's the frontispiece of a book again. This is why many of the images are engravings, because they were published for as much widespread use as possible. As I said, a painting's not just a one-off, but it's also very expensive. If you make a print, lots of people can have a version of it. So this comes from Europe, a Prophecy. And this is another favourite of yours, Sarah, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why do you like this one?
There's something about a lot of his images. They're very dark, but they're also very powerful.
Yes. Yeah, this is extraordinary. This is Urizen, who now there are lots of versions of what kind of character Urizen was, but in according to Blake's mythology, he was the embodiment of reason and law. In some sort of ideas, he's a much more aggressive force, but he's holding this compass and he's kind of measuring the world. He's organizing the world. He's somehow in control, isn't it? There were 18 plates in the book in Europe, a Prophecy, published in 1794. And there are only 9 copies. So if you come across one in a charity shop, just hang on to it, because it's probably be worth a lot of money. So 9 copies, 18 plates and 9 copies of the book. So he's kneeling, this figure of God or Urizen, kneeling, surrounded by a dark cloud. He's holding a compass and he's measuring the void, the black void below him. It's interesting, actually. He loved this image. It was one of Blake's favourite images. It's really nice that you like it, Sarah, because it was one of Blake's favourites. And he was asked to he was commissioned to make a copy of it when he was dying, and so he worked on it in his what became his deathbed, propped up in his sickbed, tinting the colours and doing the. So it was the print was in the engraving was printed, and then he coloured it on his deathbed. So that's an extraordinary idea, isn't it? That it was so important to him. Okay, I think that's a wonderful image. I wanted to just show you a couple of things to kind of give you a sense of how important Blake has become, because, as I said, he didn't, he was not appreciated at all in his life, thought to be bonkers. And he was, another thing that made him kind of something of an outcast was he was very critical of a lot of things, not just religion, but he was very critical of science, which was a sort of developing idea. The scientists were called natural philosophers at this time, and the period of the Enlightenment, where everything was thought to have a solution, a sort of sense. And the Enlightenment was very much about finding what the sense was in nature, and he didn't like this idea. He thought this was an appalling idea, because everything had to have, for him, had to have a huge mystery. He condemned Isaac Newton, John Locke, and Francis Bacon. They were the three sort of principles of the new science. And so he makes this picture. So this is image 4 of Newton. And he makes this image of Newton measuring. And again, now it's interesting, the comparison with Europe of Prophecy, because there Urizen is measuring the void. Here, Newton is measuring on a sheet of paper. He's working something out. And Blake was really, he thought Newton was over scientific, over reductive, that it takes away the mystery of the universe. And so what he's doing is showing him following the rules. He's pointing to the paper, showing the compass, and he's sitting on the rock. And actually, when you look at this image, again, it's a coloured engraving. You should look at the rock as much as at the figure, because the rock is absolutely beautiful. It's covered in sort of incrustations and plants and fossils. The painting really is about the rock. It's about the beauty of nature, rather than about the determination of man to kind of uncover all the mysteries. So it's an extraordinary image, actually. Image 5 is a modern version of this painting, and this was made by a very significant 20th century sculptor, Edoardo Palozzi, died a few years ago. It's outside the British Library, so you might have seen it. It's absolutely huge, unlike Blake's work, which is quite small, mostly because he's making plates. This is vast. And you can see it from the Euston Road. So if you're ever passing on the Euston Road, passing the British Library. So this is a sculptural version of Palozzi's sculptural version of Blake's work. And he's inspired all sorts of people. Vaughan Williams set his poems to music. Joni Mitchell wrote a song which was based on Blake. He's had a huge effect subsequently, but not, as I said, not during his lifetime. Sarah, any more questions?
Yeah, I've got one, but I'll tell you a bit of a random trivia. Duran Duran did a musical piece called Tiger Tiger. Random. There you go. Right. I did miss one of Sally's. Sorry, Sally. But she's asked, what does Anne think to adding words to an image? She's curious because
that's right. Yes.
Yeah, she's doing a piece similar to that at the minute. She wants to know your opinion.
Right. I think it's a very interesting approach, actually. I think that in terms of image versus words, and this is a much more it's quite a big idea, this, but it's quite complicated because it's easier to read the words than to look at the image. The image takes more brain power than words. It's to do with our idea of understanding, how we understand things, that we think we understand words immediately. In fact, poetry is complicated and isn't immediately understood. But if you look at a drawing and a set of words, you'll read the words first. So I think that's something that you have to bear in mind. I think with Blake's work, he was so excited about combining language and image that it does really work for him. And his, this kind of crazy system that he used to make the images was part of that process of really long-winded, taking ages to make something. And so I think it can work, but I think it's sometimes you have to be careful how you're presenting the text in terms of contemporary work. Sally, tell me more about your work later, and I'll be really interested in discussing it with you. It'd be great. Thank you. Any more?
That's it for the moment.
Brilliant. Okay, so we're just going to look at the last image, and I've chosen this because this is image 6, an image of Satan. Although actually it's had lots of titles. I don't think it was titled by Blake because it's been called Head of a Damned Soul in Dante's Inferno, or Head of a Man in Fire, or Head of a Man Tormented in Fire, or Satan. So all of those have been its titles at various times. And because, as I said, with etchings and engravings, there are loads of versions, so people will title it how they want to. It was made in 1789. And the reason I wanted you to look at this is that you can see how the engraving is done on this. So I hope you can see this on your screen. You can see the kind of marks, particularly on the face, on the cheek. You can see these sort of curving marks, which is made with the earshot tool. And he used a little kind of flicks of this sharp tool to kind of give a sense of flesh. And the system, and I don't know if you can see this, but you have lines kind of going one way and then lines going the other way, and that's called cross hatching. And that was the way of building up tone in engraving, because you couldn't have tone. You couldn't. Later on in etching, they kind of invent a way to make tone, which is using resin. But at this time you couldn't. So to build up tone, to build up the sort of darker areas, you'd have to do more lines, more crosshatch lines. It's quite an extraordinary image, isn't it? The rolling eyes are absolutely terrifying. And it's as if his eyes have rolled up because of the terrible heat. If it is Satan, he seems to have been pushed into his own fire, doesn't he? I don't know if it is Satan. And there's the flames behind him. If you can see, his hair almost becomes the flames of hell. So quite an extraordinary image. Do you like this one, Sarah?
It's kind of scary. I mean, he goes from something that's kind of normal, like the tiger or the lamb, to something that's as scary as that. It's opposites.
I suppose that's true. Although I think he's doing the same with all the work. I think he's doing the same thing. He's questioning the kind of belief systems. He's questioning how you can believe two completely opposing things at the same time. I think that's why he's become so interesting to contemporary viewers. He's very, very highly regarded now. His ideas are really kind of very well thought of now. But it's like many artists. I mean, a lot of the artists we've looked at in this series have not had a very good time during their lifetime, and then they're more celebrated afterwards, which is not good for artists. We like a bit of fame and fortune while we're alive, if you don't mind. Right. So have we got any more questions?
No, I'm afraid not.
That's fine. It's perfect because we're out of time. So I would like to thank you for watching. I hope it's been interesting for you. Blake is a really big subject. I've put some links on the YouTube site, and actually there's a very nice little film, a documentary on YouTube, which I've put the link to, which does really talk about his rebellious nature, why he was a rebel, why he was sort of so disregarded in his lifetime. So that might be quite interesting to watch if you're interested in that. And there's a catalogue which is of a quite recent show at the Tate. So have a look at those if they interest you. And thank you for watching. Thank you, Sarah, for introducing me. I'm going to hand you back to Sarah now. Bye-bye.
Thank you ever so much. So thank you, everybody, for joining us and for asking your questions. I hope I covered them all and that Al answered them. In the video description below, you will find some resources to help you find more about today's topic, as well as the usual feedback form, which we would be very grateful if you could fill them in so we can continue to make Bravo 22 Live bigger and better. Now, next Tuesday's session is super exciting. We will have our final celebrity guest of the season, and it's brilliant. It will be Dame Harriet Walter, and she's going to be joined by our very own Shirley Rimmer for the last in our Conversation With series. And on Thursday, Al Johnson will be joined by Clement Boland, and they will be demonstrating how to make structures out of card. So thank you ever so much for joining us today, and bye for now.